Battlestar Galactica wasn't the first sci-fi show to break a big Star Trek rule. When Battlestar Galactica premiered in 2004, it was hailed as a revolutionary step for televised science fiction. It was gritty, political, and unflinchingly dark, a far cry from Star Trek's bright utopian vision of humanity's future. Critics and fans alike celebrated Battlestar for breaking one of Star Trek's biggest unwritten rules. That sci-fi should show humanity at its best, not its worst. But while Battlestar Galactica is often credited with being the first to challenge this idealistic template, the truth is that another series had already done it, and long before Commander Adama and President Rosalind ever set foot on the Galactica. To find the first real break from Gene Roddenberry's optimistic rulebook, you have to go back to the 1990s, to a space station on the edge of a wormhole, Star Trek. Deep Space Nine laid the groundwork for the moral complexity that Battlestar Galactica would later perfect. And though Battlestar took it to a new level, DS9 deserves far more credit for daring to show that the final frontier wasn't always a paradise. The Star Trek rule, optimism above all. From its inception in the 1960s, Star Trek was built on one guiding principle: the future is good because humanity is good. Roddenberry's original vision rejected interpersonal conflict, human corruption, and cynicism. He believed that in the 23rd and 24th centuries, humanity would evolve past greed, prejudice, and violence. This idealism was not just a creative choice, it was the rule for writing Star Trek. Writers were explicitly told that Starfleet officers could disagree, but they couldn't truly hate or betray each other. There would be no backstabbing, no political deception, and no moral decay. Even the worst crises, from alien invasions to time paradoxes, were to be solved with compassion, intellect, and faith in the Federation's values. Then Deep Space Nine came along and began to quietly, then boldly, dismantle that rule. Deep Space Nine broke the rule first. When DS9 launched in 1993, it was already a risk. It wasn't about exploration, but occupation. The show was set on a stationary outpost instead of a starship, orbiting a planet recovering from a brutal alien dictatorship. Instead of boldly going where no one had gone before, the crew had to deal with the messy consequences of war, politics, and religion. Captain Sisko wasn't a model Federation hero. He was a grieving father and a reluctant spiritual figure. He made questionable choices that Picard never would have considered, from his manipulation of Romulan politics in The Pale Moonlight to his tacit acceptance of Section 31's existence. Sisko showed that sometimes the Federation's moral perfection was just a facade. Even more radical was DS9's treatment of the Federation itself. Instead of portraying it as an unassailable beacon of virtue, the show questioned whether the Federation's idealism could survive in a galaxy filled with enemies. The Dominion War arcs forced characters to make compromises that would have horrified the Enterprise D crew, including genetic manipulation, secret assassination, and wartime propaganda. By the end of the series, DS9 had completely reframed what Star Trek could be. It didn't reject Roddenberry's ideals, but it tested them under the harshest possible conditions, and found that idealism is meaningless if it can't survive contact with reality. Battlestar Galactica took it further. When Ronald D. Moore, a Star Trek veteran and one of DS9's key writers, developed Battlestar Galactica, he didn't just continue breaking the Star Trek rule, he shattered it completely. In Battlestar Galactica, humanity wasn't enlightened. It was desperate, divided, and brutalized. The survivors of the silent attack weren't philosopher captains. They were politicians, soldiers, and civilians trying to cling to survival and sanity. The ethical clarity of Star Trek was replaced by moral ambiguity. What was right one episode could be horribly wrong the next. Moore himself once said that Battlestar was the show I always wanted to make inside Star Trek, but couldn't. Within Star Trek, there were boundaries he wasn't allowed to cross, rules about tone, hope, and human nature. Battlestar had no such restrictions. It was free to explore fear, faith, trauma, and power without the safety net of Federation ethics. But make no mistake, Moore's new universe didn't appear out of nowhere. Battlestar Galactica's emotional DNA came straight from Deep Space Nine. Moore had cut his teeth writing episodes that pushed the boundaries of Star Trek storytelling, including some of its darkest and most morally challenging ones. Battlestar was, in many ways, what DS9 would have been if it weren't bound by the limits of its franchise. The legacy of breaking the rule. The irony is that the Star Trek rule needed to be broken for the franchise, and science fiction as a whole, to grow. Without Deep Space Nine's moral experimentation, audiences might never have been ready for Battlestar Galactica's cynicism. And without Battlestar's success, Star Trek itself might never have found the courage to evolve. Modern Star Trek series like Discovery and Picard.